Welcome to Futureproof, where I nerd out about classic sci-fi staples and their real-world counterparts. I'm your host, the result of Michael Swaim cloning himself to harvest organs from, but then eventually swapping every single body part with the cloned ones, including brain, skin, and, in a real feat of surgineering, skeleton bones. So I guess I'm like halfway between being the real Swaim and a Swaim clone. Philosophers are baffled. All I know for sure is he forgot the penis. Or kept it for himself intentionally, but why would he want two? Unless, of course, the vagina-shaped locks on the vault door. He can trade the penises for more information about where to find the matching keys. Damn, I'm always one step ahead of me. The line between a clone and an evil twin, doppelganger, or mirror self can get blurry sometimes in fiction, but the science behind realistic cloning was actually pretty well understood long before pop culture caught up. Hans Driesch split up a two-celled sea urchin embryo and grew both into identical sea urchins all the way back in 1885. And by 1931, Aldous Huxley had published the sci-fi classic Brave New World, featuring a society separated into castes based on the quality of the genes people were cloned from. Nevertheless, most video games, movies, and shows still choose to completely fudge cloning into something much simpler, because it's a lot more fun to cast the same actor twice and let them bounce off themselves than it is to watch them play against an egg fertilized with their own DNA. My first exposure to the idea was in Calvin and Hobbes. All that process required was a cardboard box with the word duplicator written on the side. Naturally, I tried it with my own box with timely reference written on the side, but when I opened it up, it was still just full of my old Herman's Hermit concert tees and jorts. And jarts, if I'm being honest. But I didn't want to say that because it sounds so much like jorts, and I was worried you'd think I was making this all up. But I'm not. From light, bubbly fun, like the Prestige, to the brooding angst of multiplicity, we really seem to like to imagine human cloning as just a Xerox machine, or else a teleporter that spits out a copy of the person but keeps the original. Incidentally, the episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation where Riker's teleporter beam gets refracted and spits out a clone predates the Prestige by 13 years. Eat it, Tesla. Go fall in love with a pigeon. I think part of this has to do with the human urge to examine and understand ourselves, for which a clone is a handy story device, and part of it has to do with the fact that twins and mirrors already exist. Not to mention we've been cloning plants since 1954, and Friedrich Miescher identified DNA as the body's instructions for building a human back in freaking 1869, dog. For some perspective, that's the same year treason charges against Jefferson Davis were dropped. That's right, it was so long ago that the US legal system gave a racist insurrectionist ex-president a total pass. How times change. In stories featuring full-on pixel-perfect clonal copies, there are a few ways you can go, all of which say something about identity, what forms us, nature versus nurture. There's stuff like Horizon Zero Dawn, the Spider-Man clone saga, and Metal Gear series, where genes basically dictate the shape of your fate, determining the type of person you are or lifestyle that you're drawn to. In Metal Gear, Snake's genetic destiny even comes down to which genes were recessive and dominant in that clone's particular case. And look, I'm not saying that these stories promote eugenics, but I'm not saying that either. In the Star Trek universe, cloning and genetic modification have been illegal ever since modified mutants tried to take over the galaxy, as if having your genes tampered with can't help but turn you into a villain. Or maybe you were a villain already, and cloning is just a handy way to pump out thousands of expendable henchmen, like the clone army from Star Wars. Or the bad guy's clones from Judge Dredd. It's probably the most basic view of cloning a story can adopt, which is just that clones are unnatural, and the original is always the good version. Then there's the stories on the opposite end of the spectrum, on the nurture side. I'm talking about stuff like Picard's clone in Star Trek Nemesis, or Qbert from Futurama. These clones act so differently from their originator that their story becomes one about how much life can change you, no matter where you started out. I was born on the set of a talking head YouTube history show, and look how far I've come. Science now. Finally, there are stories where clones represent a confounding of identity itself. Am I less special if there's another me out there? Or, big twist, if I turn out to be the copy. Man, that must have been such a good twist. The first time someone dropped it. You know, before Hitman Codename 47 and The Sixth Day and the Venture Brothers. And John dies at the end in Annihilation and Rick and Morty. Turns out we all feel like a fraud sometimes. So finding out there's a more real you out there is a story we return to a lot. I'm looking at you, Jeremy Allen White. Give us back Gene Wilder's head, you monster. Speaking of monsters, I think we can all agree that one movie probably taught the bulk of us how in vitro fertilization and cloning actually work. Jurassic Park. Thank you, Mr. DNA. It's kind of weird that you aren't a doctor, but we loved you anyway. And historically, cloning hasn't been much more complicated than Spielberg made it out to be. For example, in 1928, Hans Spemann forced a salamander egg to produce clones just by tying a baby's hair around the egg as the cells split to push some of the nuclei into a separate little area. Naturally, he had to perform the act many, many times to verify the results, and we thank all the bald babies who sacrificed so much in the name of science. Of course, that kind of cloning is a lot easier to pull off with animals that are already parthenogenetic, which means they produce an egg that doesn't need to be fertilized to produce offspring. Parthenogenetic animals include aphids, tapeworms, jellyfish, marmor crabs, boa constrictors, lizards, wasps, and sponges, including the ones with square pants. And I know what you're thinking. The f*** is a marmor crab? Look, man, I just copy and paste Wikipedia and add jokes, okay? It's probably an eel or something, I don't know. As technology and biology have both advanced, we've naturally started cloning more and more complicated stuff and in more and more sophisticated ways. At first, scientists mimicked the natural process as much as possible, isolating undifferentiated embryonic cells to implant in a surrogate egg, kind of like intercepting the fetus and passing it off to another womb. What was so huge about Dolly the sheep, cloned in 1996, was that she was cloned from a differentiated adult cell's nucleus, which is much, much harder to do. So much that she was the only embryo brought to term out of 277 attempts. That's a lot of sheep f***ing. The next year, we cloned a primate. And in 2013, the biology team under Shaukat Mitalipov were able to create a cloned human embryo that could serve as a source of stem cells to treat the original person, a fetus with a rare genetic disorder. Each step of cloning is slow going and mired in philosophical and ethical debate, as it probably should be. But ultimately, that's not the reason we don't clone people. Let's face it, if humans can do something profoundly stupid using science, the fact that it's amoral isn't going to stop us. It's actually a big challenge cloning primates and humans because our spindle proteins, which are essential for cell division, are so closely connected to the nuclei of our cells that when they try to pluck one out, they usually ruin the other part. Once they figure that out though, boom, clone your grandma. And you know it's true, because there are already companies like Viagen who will clone your dead cat or dog for 50 grand. Or if you're really splurging, clone you up a horse for 85. Hell, we'll throw in 2 pigs and a camel for 118. All clones must go! So yes, cloning is a fascinating field with the potential to open up whole new ways to treat organ failure and genetic diseases, and even potentially safeguard endangered species. Or resurrect extinct ones. Not dinosaurs, though. Real life isn't cool enough for that. They'll probably bring back this guy. What the hell even are you? Look like a squid mated with a jart. But enough about you, the audience. Me, Michael Swaim, am done now. Toss me a like and comment down below, letting me know what other sci-fi tropes you'd like me to cover, and I'll see you next time on Futureproof.